Welcome to Season 2, Episode 7 of One is Enough, the podcast where Mike Lalo, our Chief Strategy Officer and living kidney donor, and myself, Samantha Hill, the Director of Marketing here at the National Kidney Registry, discuss life with one kidney from many different perspectives.
Well, some of us have one kidney, Samantha.
Okay, I have a couple, but most of them are in op. So that doesn't. One working one. Can we say that?
Yeah.
Can we agree on that?
One working one is enough. I think that's what we should change our title to.
That's way too wordy. So today we are discussing something that I think needs to be talked about more in this community of donation, which is the crossover between donation and the LGBTQ plus community. Now, I am going to go ahead and preface this episode by saying that Mike and I are not the most well-versed in this subject. That's first
true.
of all what we have guests for. But second of all, the reason I'm saying that is because it can be a touchy subject, and Mike and I are not here to try and offend. We're probably going to get stuff wrong. So we apologize in advance. We just are here to try and get the conversation rolling.
Thank you for apologizing in advance, Samantha, because I probably will get things wrong, and sometimes I often offend. So we ask all of
Especially me.
That is not true. We ask all of our donor guests to share their donation story. And we have two amazing people that we're going to be talking to today. Mimi Mahon, who, Samantha, as of course you know, she's our first double guest.
Yes, she is.
The first
a very
time.
high distinction, and I'm not surprised by it, given how much she does for us.
She's amazing. And we have our newest guest, Jonathan Calixto. Did I say that right, Jonathan?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
See, we're already assuming we're getting stuff wrong.
No, I checked. I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure I said his name as best as possible. So, we always like our donors to share their stories. And I am chivalrous, but Mimi, you've been on before and you've got to introduce yourself before. So you're going to go second today, and we're going to introduce Jonathan first. But before I read his amazing bio, I think it's important to identify or tell everybody how I came across Jonathan. So I've talked about this before. My wife is a living liver donor, and she donated at Mount Sinai, and she got invited to a donor event. And I was at the event. They were celebrating all the liver donors, kidney donors. And this wonderful young man told his story, and I don't want to give any of it away because I want him to be able to share it. And I was just so moved that as soon as he was done, Samantha, I kind of stalked him and I was chasing him around this.
I'm not surprised.
I figured you wouldn't be.
You have a tendency.
So and then as my wife always says, I'm not usually very patient, and I'll just excuse me. And I handed him my business card and I said, listen, we do a podcast at the NKR, and I said, I think you would just be an awesome, person to speak with, and if you think you'd want to do that, please reach out to me. And he didn't think I was some crazy New Yorker, just
not at all.
bum rushing him, and he actually contacted me. So Jonathan has over 8 years of experience in public relations, influencer marketing, and communications. In 2022, he decided to fully venture into his passion for journalism, and currently is a multimedia journalist and host at BronxNet TV, and freelancing for outlets like Bella Magazine, and as an assignment desk editor at News 12. He's also using everything that he has learned to inspire others through his podcast. Look at this. He could probably teach me a thing or two. Inspire Your Inner Boss. Whether it is work on the camera or behind the scenes, Jonathan's mission is to add his own touch of representation, something he didn't see growing up, to show other queer Latin individuals that they can be seen in any industry. On top of all that, and I don't even know how you had time to donate your kidney. You are a living kidney donor, so I am not sure how you got that into your schedule.
Yeah, team no sleep over here.
Team no sleep. So, do you want to share your donation story with us?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you stalked me, and here we are today filming an episode. So it works out sometimes. I'm kidding. But thank you so much for having me. So my donation story, I donated to my dad. And for like over 10 years, really, like my family and I were seeing my dad's situation with kidney failure. So it was something that we were aware of that he was going through, but I like to say it was like an internal battle.
Right.
It was things that we couldn't really see aside from him going to the doctor often, getting sick sometimes, what seemed like a cold or whatnot, and going to the hospital numerous times. But it was just these small instances. And then in 2021 is when he got really sick, and we thought it was either like a cold or like a stomach flu bug, something. And we took him to the hospital, and he ended up staying there for like about over 2 weeks. And so that was the first time that he stayed in the hospital for over a long period of time.
Wow.
And during that time, really, our lives, and especially his, changed. And that was the first time that I say, and I always think about it as in like, the battle now became something external that we could see finally. During those 2 weeks in the hospital, he had to go on disability from work because he knew the doctors had told him like his life would change. He would probably not be able to go to work anymore. He started dialysis 3 times a week. So as someone who he was not prepared in a sense for that, just emotionally, mentally, it definitely hit him hard. And after he got out of the hospital, we started to notice him losing weight. His energy was super, super low all the time, especially with doing the dialysis 3 times a week. And so a lot of the things just changed. And it wasn't until one of the doctor's appointments now after him getting out of the hospital that we went in and we found out that a potential kidney donor, like that could be an option to save his life and just give him another look at a longer and more fulfilling life. And that started the conversation with my sibling and I. So I have a younger brother, and immediately once we heard that it could be an option, we both were in the room. I don't know, but as Latinos, we all travel in pack, and we were all there at his first appointment. My mom, my brother, and I just, being like, okay, what does he need? What translating as well. And when we heard this could be an option, we both said yes, we wanted to do it. As the oldest, I was just like, let me go in first and see if it could be an option. But there was a lot of hesitation with also being queer. So it was like, yes, but will this hold me back? Is this possible? So after almost 2 years of testing and, something that people don't know as well, as someone who, when you're going through that process as well, your insurance is very important. And he had issues with his insurance. So we had to, a year after going through exams and everything, had to switch to a new hospital and start all over at Mount Sinai, where we were able to do the surgery. But all those different factors took about 2 years. And then finally in March 29th of 2023, last year, I was able to be a kidney donor for my dad. And it's definitely changed his life.
Well, I know we're releasing this at a different date, but that date is coming up. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
So two things. One, you kind of glossed over it, and that's one of the things that moved me when I heard your story originally. So you mentioned that you being queer gave you some reservations. So before we go into that, this is probably where the potential offend part comes in. But I'm being serious. So I always remembered growing up, if you referred to someone as queer, that was offensive, calling someone a queer person. So, and I heard you, and honestly, that's what struck, because I saw you up on that stage and you identified yourself as a queer Latino man. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that word was appropriate. So can you help people like me understand that, like, is that a word that just someone from the LGBTQ community should use, or is that okay to refer to someone as queer versus gay? I hope you don't mind answering that question.
Yeah, and I will definitely speak from my own experience. I think everyone has obviously their own boundaries, their own even pronouns and things that are just out of respect for them.
Sure.
I think for me, when I was in college, I definitely learning about the history of the LGBTQ plus community, certain words as well that were used back then and how that word has evolved. For me, it has been more so, especially over the last few years, a word of ownership and something that we've reclaimed back. Just as a way to show like empowerment and that it is encompassing of our whole community, right? So it's just another form or way of saying LGBTQ plus. So I know it's been used sometimes as a way to, when people can't say all the different letters, it's just a queer kind of general word. But I definitely say I always ask someone how they feel about that word and if that is of comfort. I know as a person who is part of the community, definitely feel comfortable using it, but I also know it also within my community, it is a conversation we still have. So I always say,
Appreciate that.
it's better to ask than, yeah.
So can you go into a little bit why you thought being queer would affect you being a donor?
Yeah. So for me, it was mainly that I think being someone who is part of the community, I've always been or just have always felt like the other. And this goes all the way back, obviously, from growing up and, just dealing with kind of coming to terms with who I am. And then there's one vivid memory in college where I wasn't allowed to donate blood because I was gay. And at the time, there was obviously rules and whatnot. And so that first that kind of scenario stuck with me almost 10 years later. And here I was in a hospital still asking if I was allowed to be a part of this process because I am gay,
Wow.
So, yeah, so things like that stuck with me forever. And so those were the initial things I went back to when I was at a hospital asking if I could be potentially someone who can help my dad. It was all these things that I had gone through where I was always meant to feel like the other.
Wow.
Well, not to jump the gun here, but I think this would be a great point to bring in our other guest
I think
because
so.
the stories are very similar, and I'd love to have you two actually discuss a little bit, again, to keep Mike and I from offending the entire community. And
I could talk a lot, so it keeps me quiet.
Same. Okay, so welcome to Mimi, who, as we said, is now our first double guest. Again, not surprised. She's Mimi. We love her and we need her desperately because she's so epic and really does push kidney donation and tries to get as many people informed as humanly possible. So Mimi owns her own gym. She is a living kidney donor. She is a member of the LGBTQ community. And Jonathan, I am one of those people who always trips over the letters. So I thank you for defining queer for me. That might be very helpful in the future. As I said, Mimi is a part of your community, and it's one of the reasons I asked her here, but also because her donation story was influenced by that fact. And I will not spoil that story, but Mimi, would you like to go ahead and jump in on this one?
Yeah, so I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me 2 times. I guess the first one wasn't too bad of an episode, but I'm excited to be back. And I will say that I have listened to every single episode and I thoroughly enjoy them. And members of my gym community listen. My mom always listens, and we like to talk about the episodes. And they're just so educational and informative as well. And a little humor in there never hurts. So I appreciate you two very much and all that the NKR has done for me and my family. And I just love it.
Thank you.
So with that being said, I donated on behalf of my mother. I did not donate directly to her as part of the Paired Exchange program. But Jonathan, listening to your story, it was actually very similar. My mom also became sick. It all happened a lot faster, but there wasn't anything, like you said, on the outside. It was just, it seemed like a little cold that escalated into something more and escalated into something more. And finally, she was actually found in her bathroom on the floor, and she was septic. So she had to be rushed to the hospital. And we believe that the sepsis is what initially hurt her kidneys. And then as she was recovering from that, she actually had a cardiac arrest at a restaurant with me and my siblings. So I am a triplet. I think Samantha shared that detail, but that is...
if not, we covered it in another episode.
If not, yeah, triplet,
Everybody's
whatever.
just going to have to keep up with all of the episodes so they know what's going on, right? Just like Mimi and her gym.
Yes, when people are like, oh, you're a triplet. Wow, what's that like? And I'm like, I don't know.
One of 3. That's what you say. It's one of 3.
It's what it is.
So my triplet siblings were there with me, and my sister, who is a nurse, actually did CPR on my mom and saved her life. And so, we went through that. She got better. It was absolutely a miracle. And the only problem was that she was in kidney failure. And it's funny because back then that was a big problem. But now
it's really just a small
fast
thing,
forward, I'm
guess,
like, that's fixable. At the time, though, we knew no one that was going through that. This was 8 years ago. So we didn't know anyone that was going through that. Luckily, again, my sister, just being a healthcare professional, she was an incredible resource for our family. That's another thing that we try to advocate as a family, is having someone that can just translate,
Right.
and have a better understanding of what's going on. I've seen many other people, go through illness. And if you don't have someone that can help you through the process, that's really challenging. It can be like an entirely different language in itself. So we got through that. And then eventually the conversation came about a kidney transplant being a possibility. And again, we knew nothing about that, but my sister was like, yes, that's what needs to happen. So actually, I was tested right away, but I was not a good match for my mom. So some other relatives stepped up, which was amazing. Friends of the family. She was very fortunate to have several people step up, but they just kept getting denied for their own health reasons. And ultimately, I'll never forget the day that I called my transplant coordinator and said, I know it's going to be me, so why do we keep pushing this down the road? But at the time, and I think Samantha can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the exchange program, as we called it back then, was kind of newer. 7-8 years ago. It wasn't their first.
Yeah, we were
thought.
about half our age, so we were definitely smaller. Our operations center, which I believe Mimi has seen, it was, one guy with 6 monitors. It wasn't the state of the art situation we had here. It was Larry, but yeah, it was much more fledgling. We were really just starting to design that voucher program. Back in 2014, 2015, it was really just in infancy. So around the time Mimi would have been donating, it was definitely not as much part of the conversation in healthcare.
Yes. So they were just a little hesitant. I think maybe they had only done one at Christ Hospital.
Wow.
Again, I don't know if I have those stats perfect, but it was something that the longer we kept kicking the can down the road, I just didn't understand why we were waiting anymore. So they said, let's go. And then it was about 6 months from that conversation to being able to have our surgeries, which we were able to have on the same day, which I thought that was also just typical. And Mike one time was like, oh, that's cool that you had them on the same day. And I was like, doesn't everyone? So there's always...
Not when there's a voucher.
Yes.
Not
So
when there's a
it's
voucher.
always evolving, though. And back then, we'll dive into, as Jonathan said, not really having anyone that looked like you growing up, potentially. I think that's what I heard you say, and I feel the same way. And it's kind of funny because there's a parallel there with living kidney donation. I had no one. I was like souring the internet trying to find someone that was a kidney donor. I couldn't find anyone. I remember I finally found a doctor that I think somehow I found a doctor that maybe did CrossFit, and I was like, you lift weights, are you okay? And I think he wrote me back and said, it's all fine. It was really short, so I just couldn't really find much. And now it blows my mind at how many resources and how much information is out there for living donors, thanks to the work that people like Michael and Samantha and NKR. So it's really incredible. I don't take that for granted at all. And I think it's amazing. There's a lot of education that still needs to happen about the voucher program and the paired exchange program, because I still think people think they only can have a kidney if it's a direct match. So that's for another topic, but yeah, that's my story.
Don't worry, it's on the list. Okay. But so Mimi, I'm going to dive into the potential for offending, and I'm just going to ask you to, give a little of your LGBTQ community aspect of yourself.
Yes. So the good news is you cannot offend me, because if you care about me,
no, but I can offend all the listeners.
That's right.
And
You
then they
can
won't
do that.
listen.
Oh, definitely.
We only have like 12 to begin with.
definitely.
A
I can only
million.
say,
What happened? Smith, we had 1 million last week. We dropped. Oh my gosh.
yes, you definitely can offend
It's all
others.
Mimi's mom. Just repeat listening. Though.
That's right.
Hello, Mimi's mom.
Yeah. Hi, Mom. I hope you're
Hi,
listening.
Mimi's mom.
So, like I said, the reason I want to say that you can't offend me, Samantha, is because if you care about me and I know you're coming from a good place, you can say whatever you want as long as you don't mean to hurt me. And then
Right.
I will educate you. And my mom will laugh, because that happens to my mom our whole life. She will be laughing right now because maybe she'll...
And here's the thing,
she can
Mimi's
say-
arms are very large, so when she educates you,
It's in a headlock.
there's a little...
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm always...
There's some intimidation going on,
You don't
too.
know how many people want to say, oh, Mimi could beat you up. I don't beat people up. Bring in for the hug. You know this. Now, maybe mid-competition, you should be a little nervous. But other than that, no, I'm a hugger, not a fighter, all day long.
I think Ronnie's the only one nervous mid-competition.
That's right. And we love each other, too. So it's all good.
You do.
But with that being said, you can't offend me. I most prefer the term gay, but actually what's interesting is my wife, Ashley, and I, we have 2 children, Jonathan. We have a 2.5-year-old and an 8-month-old. And
Cutest human beings
they're my
alive.
world. Yes, you'll have to follow me on social media so you can see some adorable pictures of Nico and Luca are their names. And what's funny is Ashley and I both have always really not preferred to be given much of a title. So call me my name, and that's probably the best bet for you, and that will work. So that's just kind of how we are. I think that it's really important to listen to how other people identify themselves. If I identify myself as a gay woman, if I identify myself with female pronouns, that's what you should go with. And when in doubt, I would say just use people's names. That's a good start.
So Mimi and Jonathan,
there you go.
Before we
Good
get
job,
off
Michael.
your donation story topic, was there ever a point where either, and this is a question it goes to either one of you, where you just thought like, I can't do this, or I'm not going to do this. And I know both of you, one, Jonathan, directly, you were donating to a parent, and Mimi, you were donating on behalf of. But did that ever come across your mind, either because of the whole process or because, of being part of the LGBTQ plus community? Jonathan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I would say for myself, there wasn't a hesitation in regards to, I knew I wanted to do it for my dad and like to help him. And obviously there's a relationship there, so that it could be different per each case. I think for me, it was just more the outside fears of everything else. I'm someone who had never had major surgery. Again, the whole aspect of being someone Latino and queer and going through this process. What did it mean for me? What would it mean certain specific samples and testing that I had to do just because I was and identified as part of this community. So those were my fears. But I knew, and it's so weird when I've also tried to explain it to friends and peers. It was, and even to my parents when we talked about doing this, and, obviously as my parents, they were like, no, we can find another option. We can wait. He can be on the list. It's fine.
Right.
And it was this thing of, I had never been so sure of something in my life as I wanted to be that for my dad. But I also had to deal with that. If we tested and I wasn't a match, what would happen, or if we went through a certain process and then it got to the surgery day and something out of our control happened and then, it didn't get to happen. And how would that make my dad feel? So all those different things I was dealing with, and that was that conflict of balance emotionally.
What about you, Mimi?
I never had any reservations. I think that a lot of donors say they just feel like some sort of calling to do it. And I definitely felt that strongly. I will say I do joke with my siblings because not only am I a triplet, I have 2 older brothers. And I feel like none of them got tested. So I always say
We're
that.
spilling some tea today. Okay.
Yes, none of them got tested. And my sister was pregnant at the time and then kind of throughout it. She has 3 children, so that's okay. She did her job and she totally would do it too. I just know she would. But my brothers, I'm like, do they think only females can donate? So that's my joke with them.
So
what I will say is females are actually more inclined to donate than males.
That is true.
Oh, wow.
It is part of the statistics.
That is true.
That's interesting. But yes, I never had any reservations. I felt really strongly about wanting to do it. And honestly, I think I just went into it all very naive because I wasn't really worried about the surgery or the outcome. I was just worried about helping my mom, and I would deal with that later. So
Mimi, you and I have known each other for a while. And while we don't talk nearly enough, we do talk, occasionally as friends. And I know from those discussions that part of your donation journey was impacted by your sexuality because you were given pushback, in fact, because of it. Would you be willing to share that?
Yes. So when I had my initial screening done and I had a meeting with the social worker, this was, again, about 8 years ago in Cincinnati. I wasn't living in the area at the time. I was living in Cleveland, which I was working at Oberlin College, which is a very liberal, progressive college. And I had come back into town to do all my testing through Christ Hospital. And when I met with this person, that was one of his questions. He asked me about my sexual orientation. And I thought that was semi-confusing because I thought, what does that have to do with donating a kidney? did you ask me that because I look gay or I have short hair? You know, I just felt a little bit, I don't know, singled out for a question that to me had no relevance on anything.
Yeah.
So when I answered the question with, well, I'm in a relationship with a woman at the moment, and he said, okay, well, it sounds like having children is not in the cards for you. And he just moved along. And I just couldn't believe it. But I also thought, well, maybe that's what's happening here. This guy has no idea what he's talking about, but I was eye on the prize. I just was worried about donating my kidney to my mom. So I literally just put it aside, continued on, you know, I can't remember if my triplet brother, Chris, would have been in the room. It seems like he was, but I don't know if that was allowed. So maybe he was just waiting on me and I told him the story, but he was pretty mad. And I told him, I was like, don't worry about it. Let's just, you know, keep moving forward. We can deal with that later. But I did deal with it later. So after I had my surgery and I was recovering, still in the hospital, I think I was only there for a day or two, I actually asked to speak with my transplant coordinator in person. And I just told her what happened and that it was a long time ago, but it really upset me. And at the end of the day, it really wasn't about me. It's about future donors or, you know, people that are interested in donating their kidney and making sure that they have all the resources that anyone else would have, because that was just an incredibly ignorant thing to say and just not, you know, not an assumption that he should have made.
Obviously not true since you have 2 children.
Yeah. So I do have 2 children and my wife did carry them, but as Samantha knows, foreshadowing, hopefully, maybe one day I'd like to carry one as well. That's a scary
different
thought,
topic, but we're all hope for.
Little Mimi Jr. running around at the donor games would be pretty fun to see. But yeah, I just thought that was crazy that he dismissed me like that. I still can't believe it, honestly, when I share the story.
Yeah, and I believe that you had another relative going through the process and they were not asked even remotely close to those questions?
Yeah, you're right. It was a friend of the family that, you know, it was, I don't think she had children at the time. She was married to a man, and I don't know what questions he exactly asked her, because I obviously wasn't there. But my sister shared with me that this friend, you know, was told, oh, yeah, you can have children. It might be a little higher risk pregnancy just because you have one kidney. And I know monitoring blood pressure, but it sounds like they had a little bit more of a conversation where, you know, it just wasn't in the cards for me.
Jonathan, you have a very specific look on your face. Would you like to respond?
Well, yeah.
Jonathan's going to get him.
Yeah, I know.
Get
I'm
him,
like,
Jonathan.
give me an address, give me a location, please drop a pin.
I did not use names.
He's going to send Mike to go stalk that guy. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you know what? Mike's good at it. He probably could find out who it is.
Well, and I'm from Queens, New York, so I know people, you know. Jonathan, I wanted to ask you, how beneficial do you think it is for people in the LGBTQ plus community to see themselves in people like, you know, you and Mimi being, you know, living donors?
I think in any industry, in any space, it's important to see the representation. There can never be enough representation, I say. I think especially when it comes to being a living donor in general, it's important for us to see ourselves, whether it is through testimonials of other people like Mimi, of situations that happened, you were saying like about 8 years ago or so, you know, how much things have changed even since then, you know, and what things are we dealing with now? I think that it starts a conversation, especially for us who are going through it or have been through it. And one thing that I think representation and seeing ourselves in this especially is important is because as grown-ups and as we get older, I think it's easy for us to research and find communities and people that look like us or that relate to us, especially in our orientation in our community. But as younger people, you know, people who are growing up, if they don't see that, they don't have access to research that stays with them forever, you know? And so I think it's important for them to be able to see people who look like them, who have gone through things like this, and that are talking about it, because it'll start conversations from very young.
Absolutely. And I would just like to get your opinion on where do you think the friction point comes from between the medical world and the community? Is it from those decades old rules where, you know, gay men weren't allowed to you know, give blood unless they like abstain from sex for 6 months, or is it from you know, other instances where, you know, they felt that the medical community wasn't being upfront with them? Where do you think the friction point comes from?
Yeah. I would say for me specifically, I think back to, yes, all those rules back then that we had, and how it was. Because I even remember back to that like donating blood story, what that happened in college. I just remember there also like there being a sign specifically saying that, people who were gay or whatnot, we had to speak to a coordinator, or that, there was other alternatives for us. But it was more so of directing us to another person to speak to then tell us no. It wasn't that it was like, oh, we were going to be talked to and probably be able to donate blood down the line, So I think all those different rules and the marketing behind it that really pushed it was
What is like shocking to me, we have a bunch of great researchers that help us out. The FDA only changed this rule in 2023, so I'm hoping that this is a typo. I guess it's no.
I don't think it is.
No, yeah. And it was a huge thing.
2023, that was like
last year.
Yeah.
A few months ago, yes.
Yeah, literally not even a year.
I'm not like being like theatrical. I'm like shocked by that. That is, I read that and I was saddened, like perplexed, and a bunch of other words that I probably can't pronounce.
Yeah, we're trying to keep this able for anyone to listen to.
But I think it goes to I'm not part of that community, so I don't know all the things that are going on with the community, and to see that only in 2023 a rule that was banning gay men from donating blood unless they abstain from sex for a certain period of time. That is just mind blowing to me. I can't even believe that policy was in place. It's just I don't know, crazy.
Yeah, and even when I read the whole part about being abstinent for 6 months, like I don't know why, and maybe it was my lack of research even back then when I was in college. But for me, it was a plain no. Just because you're gay, you can't donate blood. So it wasn't even that explanation of you have to do abstain from sex for 6 months or all these different things. So I think that in itself, those rules, those kind of limitations, sometimes that creates a culture of us then feeling like the other in all different spaces, not just in the medical space, but then feeling like we have to tippy toe around every single thing.
I love that Jonathan says like feeling like the other. I definitely, that resonates with me. I think I most often feel like we're moving towards a good place in the world where we can just be seen as people, just who we are. Like, I'm Mimi, you're Jonathan, it's not like we have to be in some certain box or bubble. And I know I can only speak for my experiences and myself, but I know, being in a same-sex marriage, having 2 children, like we always just want to be seen as a family. We don't want to be seen as that specific type of family. That's just really something that's on my mind a lot, and thinking about, having this conversation today. I was fortunate growing up. The other thing I think about is not just your sexuality, but just gender. I think that's another part of it, and that's another conversation. But for me, growing up with siblings, my sister and I, so many years ago, we played on teams with mostly boys. And I thought about it, and my parents, thankfully, they didn't use phrases like tomboy or girly girl, thankfully, because people still use those terms. And that's, again, just like putting you in a box. Like I see parts about me that are masculine and parts about me that are feminine. And, because I have muscles, Samantha, I'm not going to beat you up. It's like, I think that, I don't want to just be seen as a certain way. I think that we're all way more complex and just should be seen as us. And I'm lucky that I had parents that didn't put me in a box, and I'm appreciative of that all these years later. And at the end of the day, I didn't want to be the best girl on the boys' team. I wanted to be the best on the team. And I think that's, how I still live my life.
Well, you are the strongest person in the gym. That is for sure. Male,
certainly our
female,
gym, whenever we have our competition.
My goal is to compete against the guy donors. Wouldn't that be great?
Ooh.
I think Ronnie and I could do it.
Cody's.
And probably more, because it just keeps getting better and better. But again, that's a conversation for another time.
I would love to watch you beat Cody.
If you need a host or...
There would be popcorn.
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan, I'm going to get you in on those. Again, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
But
He's actually, you're pretty local, Jonathan. So
yeah, I just can't compete.
You might be.
I know my strengths, and it's not that.
Well, Jonathan, I am present at all of the donor games championships. I don't compete either. I just talk. So
He just walks around with a microphone. We don't entirely know what he does.
I'll be more than happy to get another microphone, and then you and I can host the Donut Games
I would
together.
just like to say he's not the one that would be ordering another microphone. That would be me. But you know what? It's fine. He can pretend.
I said we.
We
Did
do
I say
have fun,
we?
Jonathan, and I hope you can make it
I'm excited,
to the
yes.
championship or an event, wherever it's at.
Definitely.
So what, going back to what you were saying, what's something that, the medical community or just people in general can do to support, your community in getting them, more comfortable with the idea of donating a kidney or even just, think about it. Feel free to either of you jump in. So I don't have to say Bueller.
I would definitely say, obviously as someone who comes from like the marketing communications space, I think just seeing more branding of these stories that are out there, I think especially, I don't know if this has happened for other people, but since becoming a kidney donor, I'm just so much more aware of the banners, the signs even on the train where I was like, oh, wow, like they're actually promoting like being a donor and saving someone's lives. It was like a big painting on a building in the city that I was, and I'm just so much more aware of that. And I think especially for the LGBTQ plus community, we need to be able to now see ourselves in those stories. I think also these conversations are great because when I was going even through it just about a year or two ago, I wish I would have had a Mimi, or someone that Mount Sinai or my hospital would have been able to direct me to a person who was a part of the community. So I think even having a database of that is great to be able to talk to people as well.
That's a great point, Joe.
Well, hold on, Mimi. So I just wanted to touch base on that. Yep. The National Kidney Registry has a program called Donor Connect. And we have the National Kidney Donation Organization, National Kidney Foundation, and we even have our own internal microsite donor mentors. And the great thing is that we have a donor for everybody, right? So if you're a female who hasn't had a child yet but wants to talk to a donor who had a child after donation, we have that. We've had people who are part of the LGBTQ community ask to speak to a donor who is part of that community. We have access to that. So just to hit on what you're saying, I think it is important for donors in general, whoever they are, to have someone to talk to about their experience, to see, what things might come up and what's going through their mind. Sorry, Mimi, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's perfect, because that was going to be my point, is how do we get people that are interested in donating connected to other people that look like them? And you just said exactly how we do that. So I think it's just important that
I read your mind.
Yeah, we need to get that out there even more. I know you all do a great job, but like I said, it sounds like Jonathan and I both didn't have anyone, and I know mine was several years ago.
Yeah.
So before you had all these great resources available to folks, but yeah, just continue to have the conversations.
That's one of the reasons why Samantha and I, were sort of passionate about this podcast. And I don't know if we said it yet, but we usually say we're trying to normalize, living kidney donation. And, with each episode, we hope it does one day reach millions of people. But, you got to keep plugging away. It's not just this podcast, or it's not just the thing we're putting out on Facebook or, LinkedIn or Instagram or X or whatever, or these other things that we have going on. We all have to do our part and keep spreading awareness, because I honestly just think most people don't know about being a living kidney donor. It doesn't even, like Jonathan said, you now all of a sudden all these billboards, when my wife and I were looking at a car, we wanted to get a Volvo. I don't think I even knew what a Volvo was. And next thing you know, I can't drive without seeing a Volvo, right? Because now it's like planted in your mind. So we got to find a way to get living kidney donation, the seeds planted in all the minds of the 200 million plus people over the age of 21 in the United States. So hopefully they'll come to the NKR and donate through us.
And just to have a general public service announcement, despite the fact that Mike and I both drive Volvos, we are not sponsored by Volvo.
It is a nice car, though.
You're just going to send,
car, though.
I thought you were going to send me a car, not just a coffee mug.
You get a car, Mimi. You get a car, Jonathan. I'm just joking.
I did.
Oh, that's not trademarked, is it?
I think another big thing.
Oprah's going to sue me now.
Yeah. I think another big thing that needs to be shared is, and I hope you experience this, Jonathan, I'd be curious if you've experienced it already, is I feel my life has been enhanced a million times over by donating. I remember, having a conversation with my dad not too long ago where he said, what a beautiful story to take something that was so hard on our family and make it into something that is it's in all of my life. I mean, I do the donor games. We're hosting a competition, a regional event for the National Kidney Registry in July at my gym. I mean, it's just really spilling into my day to day, and I love it. And I love the people I've met. I've met some of the best people. I've heard some of the best stories. I've been influenced with regards to just like my own fitness, nutrition, lifestyle through other kidney donors. It's just like by having conversations about how they handle themselves after donation. So again, it's just brought so much to my life. And I think it's not only that it won't negatively impact you. I think we're starting to take that a step further. I know Samantha Garrett said there was a quote in, I don't know, some press release recently about the donor games that not only is donating a kidney not negatively impacting your life, it in time can actually enhance your life in ways that you never could imagine. And that's something that I strongly feel. So I think that's the message. And I'm just curious, Jonathan, if you've experienced that.
Yeah, I want to say I just got a little emotional when you were saying that, because I think, coming up on 1 year of having gone through it, I have seen those changes. And I think, a lot of times we talk about the physical things that, healing and those kind of things. But I think, I don't know, I've just, in this 1 year, I've felt so much more empowered and being able to feel like I can stand up and fight for my dad as well, who continues to go through life changes and things as he is healing as well. So so just to hear you say that, it makes me excited for what I have to look forward to as well, as the years go by, of what I can do with this new type of enhanced kind of feeling. So yeah, I do think definitely have felt more empowered. I've also, as someone who is a journalist, I usually tell other people's story. And in some way, in some capacity, this has also allowed me to open up a little bit more about my own journey in hopes of helping other people, and inspiring other young people, especially, that just, as I mentioned earlier, about just being able to see themselves in any space, and being especially a living donor, you can be a hero for someone else. And I hope that, queer people, they know that they have that ability to be that for someone.
So in terms of representation, something we kind of left out in this episode is members of the LGBTQ community who are recipients. And obviously you two are not. You are the other side of the coin, as it were. But have you interacted with anyone who is in that situation?
I personally have not, to be honest. No, I haven't. Yeah. And I don't think it's something that has come up in the immediate combo. So maybe it someone could be, but I haven't per se come up with, yeah.
I have not either.
Well,
and it's funny because I think oftentimes I feel like I am the first person to do a lot of things, and I don't set out to be that way, but it seems like that kind of happens. So hopefully, after today, Jonathan and I meet numerous kidney donors and recipients who are part of the queer community. That would be fantastic.
It sounds like, Mike, you need to go find some people in your stalking pastimes so that we can have them on this episode so we can talk to them about this as well.
Once we end this podcast, I will hit the streets and start stalking immediately.
Wait, so I'm picturing a really bad scenario though, because Michael, he's going to be like going up to people like, are you a kidney donor? And are you gay? Wait, is that what I'm supposed to say? And it's just not going to end well.
Do I ask if they're LGBTQ plus first? And then when they say yes, I just don't see that going well at all. Do you have two kidneys? They say yes. And then I'm going to be in trouble. Then I'm going to come into my office here in Babylon, New York.
Get the melon ball or the chloroform.
Oh, boy.
So I asked you both what, can be done to support your community into getting this message out and whatnot. What do you think, that people in your community who have donated kidneys can do to influence the medical community? Because, they also, as evidenced by Mimi's story, could use some help as well.
I think it's just education. I mean, when I met with that social worker, I just couldn't believe that did he think that a same-sex couple cannot have children? I didn't ask him any questions because I just wanted to leave the room, but it's just making sure that they're educated.
Yeah. And I think being able to see also that partnership, right? Whether it's with organizations that are part of the community, that are local to those locations, to the hospitals, I think it would be nice to be able to see that there is a relationship there and that there are steps being taken to strengthen that relationship and to bring awareness as well.
I think that's a great question, Samantha, because transplant as a whole is in the dark ages. So, I
got transplanted in the dark ages, Mike. This is the Renaissance. Okay.
It's bad, like still today, just to use one example, if you're donating directly, Jonathan only had to see a social worker, but if you're going to be a Good Samaritan, a non-directed donor, you have to see a psychologist because you must be crazy. So there's still things within the transplant medical community that go on or that are just decades and decades and decades old. So it's sad to hear about, Mimi's experience, but it's not very surprising since the industry as a whole is still set way back into the Renaissance, I think you said, Samantha.
Yeah, every month, part of my job here is to go through news stories that, are relevant to kidney donation and put them in the right place on our websites and socials and whatnot. And this latest round, I was so happy because there's always that, nice story or 5 nice stories of, local whatever gives to local whatever. And, it's like, oh, the local high school football coach and, the librarian, whatever. And they're great feel-good stories. I'm sure, Jonathan, you've had to do a couple of those in your career as well. But it's finally starting to change, I've noticed, where, they'll interview these people and they used to say, oh, yeah, well, I didn't think I'd get somebody because, I'm an O blood type, or I needed to know. And, everybody mentions their blood type, and it drives me nuts because, as proof by Mimi, you really don't have to match at all. You don't have to be a good match. You just have to be willing and able. And you can go through this voucher program. So this time around, when I got these articles, there was, of course, one story where the recipient was like, well, I didn't think anybody was going to donate for me or could because I was an O and I needed an O. And it was like, oh God, are you kidding me? Why? How is this still the conversation? But later on in that list, there were a couple other stories where they were like, no, we just needed somebody who was able to, and they matched this person. I was able to get a kidney because of this. And it was all these voucher stories. And it was like, oh, it's finally starting to change. It's finally starting to go through. And I feel like that's kind of where we are, where we're kind of finally seeing that flip over into the Renaissance. It's still not the modern age, but I think we are it's finally starting to see that growth. But Mike, you deal with the hospitals more, so maybe you're seeing a little bit more of the old school.
I'm in general, I am a glass half full kind of guy, so I am optimistic that we're going to make change, and I think the NKR is at the forefront of that. Without a doubt, I don't think the number of living kidney donors in the United States would be where it's at without the National Kidney Registry. I know I'm paid by them because I work for them, but I would say this,
Jonathan and Mimi aren't though.
No, they're not. But I truly believe that. And
Mimi has to work for her donor games checks.
I believe that before June of 2022 when I started, and I still believe it now. And if Samantha and her dad ever choose to fire me, I'll still believe it afterwards. So I think the National Kidney Registry is.
Wait, since when did I get firing capabilities? They don't even let me go in front of a transplant center without supervision.
That's true. Well, just one day, maybe your dad takes a day off and he's like, Samantha, you have the helm, and then you're like, get rid of that guy, Michael, right away. First thing I'm gonna do. But
okay,
I think,
so this involves my father going nuts. Good to know. Okay.
But I do think we're making strides for sure. So as usual, I know that there's so much more that we could talk about today, both policy and science-wise, including the HOPE Act of 2013, cutting-edge transplant science related to hepatitis C, and so much more. But as we commemorate Pride Month, I want to bring it back to our 2 amazing living donors, Jonathan and Mimi. I love to say that we have millions of listeners because if I keep saying it, I think one day it will be true. And I have that one friend, Dan, on the train. But I always like to ask, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to say?
We covered it all, but I will say just with Samantha's last topic about people still not understanding that you do not have to be a direct match. That's just really very real. People still say that to me about other friends or loved ones that they know that need a kidney transplant. And they still try to tell me that that person needs to find a direct match. I'm like, wait, you're talking to me. I'm telling you, I did not donate directly to my mom. So I'm an example, and they still, just kind of gloss over it. So I think just continuing to provide education. I'm so fortunate for everything that you both do and that the Donor Games and the National Kidney Registry all do collectively. And like Jonathan said, I just want to be an example to others for so many reasons. And obviously we're on for a specific reason today. And I'm very proud of who I am. And I didn't have many people to look up to as a child. And so I just want to be that person for others now.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I would say that I think a lot of times in media, we see that the stories that are highlighted is just a donation story. And I think what's beautiful about this opportunity is that we get to see the life afterwards as well, that we get to talk about, the story doesn't just stop there at the donation or surgery day as well. So I do encourage people to just be able to, one, obviously hear our stories and hopefully feel empowered by it, but also to follow up if you have questions and to just continue the conversation. Because I'm sure, just like Mimi, I know I'm seeing my dad and his progress now, and because it's such a personal situation that we are in, obviously, that I donated to my dad. So, the story continues, and just thank you for the opportunity to be here and even introducing me to Mimi. Now I have someone else who is queer, who's part of the community, who donated, and it's so exciting to be able to say like, oh my God, there's someone else who has done it. And yeah,
Jonathan, she said gay woman, not
Mimi,
queer.
Hi.
Jonathan can't offend me. We're best friends already, so it's all good.
Well, before Samantha says our final goodbyes, I honestly, truly, from the bottom of my heart, want to say thank you to both of you. I admire both of you, and I look up to both of you. So thank you for agreeing to come on and talking to us.
All right. So, Jonathan, Mimi, on behalf of One is Enough and the National Kidney Registry, I want to thank you both for being with us and sharing your stories today and, being as vocal as you are in all of the communities that you are a part of, because it's not just, the LGBT community. I mean, CrossFit, marketing, Northeast, Midwest, etc. And obviously the living donation community, with support of individuals like you, that we will continue to raise awareness about the need for living kidney donation and the need for meaningful and accurate information about becoming a living kidney donor. I also want to thank everyone who is downloading and listening to our podcast. If anyone listening has been inspired to consider donation or at least spread the word about living donation, we greatly appreciate that. It really validates our efforts on this podcast. It's the reason that we are doing this podcast is to help literally anyone and everyone who needs a kidney get back to being that healthy person, and anybody and everyone who wants to donate a kidney to help someone get back to being a full, awesome, epic human being, regardless of literally anything else in their life that might define them. If you're looking for more information on living kidney donation, or you'd like to start the process of being screened as a potential donor, or you need some resources as a recipient, please visit kidneyregistry.org.
Cue the music. You can learn more about the podcast by visiting kidneyregistry.org/one. When you're there, you can sign up to be on our email list so that you'll be the first to know when we drop a new episode. And trust me, you want to be the first to know.